everything that is not clear on your side, and should you need any clarity, let me know, and then I'll stop and attend to your questions. All right. Those that are joining for the first time, I'm Dr. Malonto. I'm based at UKZN Westville campus, and I'm literally just here for the day to lecture the process on beer making. And please make sure to pay attention to all the concepts as they may be used in your assessments, either the test or the examination that will be written later this year. All right, we paused at the word preparation in the morning, so we are continuing now up until 12:10. And as I said, I will be uploading this presentation. So should you need any clarity, you can watch it again. And if you still need further discussions, I will open a discussion forum on your Learn platform. Do post your questions in there so that we can discuss them briefly as time goes by. All right, so those that were here in the morning, we did discuss on how the beer malt is produced, or the barley malt. And then again, we please make sure to mute yourselves, Kuto. I'm not sure how you're attending a class with the music playing in the background, but it's okay. So as we said, we discussed the malting process, and then we were on the wort boiling or wort production, which I did go into details about how you prepare your malt in terms of germination and then kilning, and eventually grinding through the rollers to make a gist, which is the powdered form of the grains that you want to be using in your kettle. And this is the kettle or the brewer, which will be brought to boiling when you are preparing beer. Okay. So continuing. So meshing entails mixing, which we spoke about, and I think this is the slide that we stopped at after telling you that we will have to show you guys how a Luther 10 or a mesh filter looks like. There is a traditional method that can be used, and obviously with developments, everything has been optimized. And then with optimization comes automation. So we do have automated systems that can allow you to brew without stopping. And as compared to the previous methods or the traditional methods, you had to do everything manually, which is quite laborious. However, with the recent systems similar to the one that I showed you guys in the morning, you can start off with just adding your yeast and then the water. Still make sure to prepare all your ingredients. It's more like having a pressure cooker, which is a bit different from your normal pot. However, the food is still being cooked the same. So in the morning, I spoke about the Luther 10 and the mesh filters, which is what I need you to pay close attention to. Right. So this is how the vessel looks like inside, which is the Luther 10. This is the more modernized version of it. I couldn't get the pictures to our Westville campus brewery because it is in operation, so we're not allowed to be opening the process normally, especially if there's any process that is running in there. However, this is how the traditional mesh filter looks like. So you open this and then you add your yeast inside the mesh. It's more like a bag and it has an opening, which you're gonna be adding your ground malt, and then you dip it into the water. So this must be all the way into the water before you adjust the temperature to 68, as we discussed during the meshing part. All right. So once everything is done, okay, now I'm continuing from where we left off, which it was after separating the wort with the spent grain. So the separated wort is collected in a kettle and boiled. Okay. So the liquid that we collect from the meshing section, Bongeka. Right. So we do have our separation that happens at the Luther 10. Remember, you first mill, which is to grind the malt, and then after making the yeast, which is the powdered malt, you then add it into the meshing vessel. And in the meshing vessel, you add warm water, which will be around about 68 and not more than 80. And then with that, you need to also make sure that your temperature does not go too high, right? And then after that is done, you then allow that to be maintained at 68 degrees for around about an hour. And after that hour, you then separate the spent grain and the liquid, which is the wort. Chino, please mute yourself. I think I'm muting for the second time. Right. So
no, sir, sorry, sir, I wanted to ask you a question.
Okay, you may.
Yes. So what is the word? What is the word in this? What is the what are we talking about when you talk about the word? WORT.
Okay, Trina, this is what we discussed in the morning. Remember, I said since you were not in the session in the morning, please go back to the notes and then I'll upload the recordings and then you can be up to speed with where we are right now. But in the morning, we did discuss what a wort is, and just in simple terms, the wort is the liquid that you get from heating up the yeast. The yeast is the grains that you have ground, which you've made powder, and then you heat it up in water at 68 degrees for an hour. And then the liquid that you get from there, which will be containing your carbohydrates that you extracted from the grains, will be used as the sugar or the substrate for the yeast to generate the alcohol. And that is how beer is made.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, moving on. So as I was saying, there is a boiling stage after the wort is being made. You're gonna collect the wort and then add it into the kettle, which is the brewer. And then in this kettle, you're gonna have to bring it to boil. I did show you how the kettle looks like. That needs to be sealed and then only opened after 30 minutes so that the DMSO can go out. I'm not gonna get into the details of that. Those are technicalities. However, boiling is conducted to extract the bitter substances from the hops. We did discuss what hops are, and then further precipitate the unwanted nitrogenous material. Remember, we are using plant-based material, and still in those pulverized and liquid extracts, we still do have the amino acid, we have the proteins, we've got the carbohydrates. That still further needs to be broken down. And then during the whole boiling, those particles are being precipitated to make what we call a cake in the brewery. However, we'll discuss how that is removed with the boiling. You have to allow it to cool after boiling, and then as it cools, all the sediments will settle at the bottom, and then you remove your green beer, all right, which is called a break. We'll get to that at the later stage. And then another thing that boiling does, it terminates the enzymatic action. Remember, we spoke extensively about enzymes and how they are released from the grains, and also having the microorganisms that are part of the seeds, which could be there. Those enzymes now needs to be terminated or need to be destroyed so that they do not continue operating. And that's why we need to bring the temperature to boiling. We should know by now from biochemistry and basic microbiology that enzymes denature at high temperatures. So boiling at this stage also helps with terminating or denaturing those enzymes. And then to remove undesirable volatile compounds. Remember, we'll also be using the hops at this stage. And also, this is also another stage where you can add what we call adjuncts. We're going to get to that at the later stage to orientate you guys on what adjuncts are. And then again, to sterilize the wort. Sterilization takes place when you are boiling or heating a liquid to beyond 100 degrees. And then in that particular temperature, viable microorganisms are killed, including the spores, if the temperature is up to 120 degrees, but then with boiling, it only goes up to 100. And of course, that sterilizes your worts. And lastly, it evaporates excess water. Remember, we need to concentrate it to make it more usable by the microorganism, which will be increasing the carbohydrate concentrations. Okay. So boiling terminates the meshing process and fixes the carbohydrate composition and spectrum of the wort. And after this particular step of boiling, you can then take your wort and measure how much sugar you do have in your wort. And then you can even estimate how much alcohol can be produced by yeast when you've got that particular wort. And I'll get to that stage and show you guys how we measure or we estimate how much alcohol we can make from the wort that you're going to be making. Right. So boiling sterilizes the wort and microflora of the malt. Remember what malt is. And the hops. The hops are still plant products, which could also be having some microorganisms. And then lastly, the adjuncts are also further destroyed. Okay, so I did say that the adjuncts are the... Bandiswa, do you have a question? All right. So the adjuncts are the substrates or excess additional supplements that can be added into your wort to increase the sugar concentration, and others are also added to add flavor. So that's what we need to keep in mind. Okay. So this sterilizes the wort and then also removes the microflora. And then in the open kettles, 4 to 10% of the wort evaporates during the 1 hour boiling. So as I said, you need to concentrate your wort. And again, the boiling terminates the meshing process. As I said, it fixes the composition of your wort. That is the carbohydrates mainly, which is the sugar that your yeast will be using at the later stage. Okay. Is everything still clear? Are you guys with me? All right, that's a good question. Remember, the enzymes were there to help you extract the ingredients from the malt. The malt are also the plant products that also have their own enzymes. And because those enzymes, when you are meshing, you are removing them or you're extracting them from these husks or the spent grain, and they will be part of your wort. And because you do no longer need those enzymes or their activity, you need to denature them or remove them. And by so doing, which is boiling, you are denaturing those enzymes. And at the end, you'll only be having your sugar extract, which is the carbohydrates that your yeast will be using to make the beer. And then again, in that wort, you will then also be having the hops. Remember, you're adding the hops, which will be giving you the aroma and then the taste. So that taste still needs to be maintained at that particular stage, but all the remaining spent hops needs to be removed. Does it make sense? All right. All right. Let's continue. Okay, so just remember that the volume that you start off with, you do not end up with it as 10% of it. Maximum 10% of it will be lost during the boiling, because there is boiling, there is steam being formed, and that steam is the loss of water that will be from your kettle. All right. So the break, this is the precipitate that forms from the coagulation of nitrogenous constituents, carbohydrates, and or the polyphenolic components, which are the tannins. This is what we're talking about now, that you need to boil it. And after boiling it, all the waste or that the components that have been destroyed by heat will then settle at the bottom. And then on top will be having a clear wort, which will be used in the fermentation process. And then again, overboiling, which can be more than an hour, will result into the loss of volatile hop oils. Okay, these are the ones that are adding the flavor and also the aroma or the smell of the beer. And these are very necessary, because if you lose them, it will prevent the flavor of the hop oil to be too pronounced in the resulting beer. It can also be a bad thing if you underboil, and if you underboil, you'll also be not extracting enough oil from the hops. So that's why the set time for boiling is said to be 1 hour. No more, not more than that or not less than that. But most importantly, make sure you maintain the temperature at boiling for an hour. Temperature control is very important in beer making. Remember, with meshing, you are working at a temperature of 68 and above, and not more than 70 or 80. 80 is the max. You cannot go more than 80. But optimally is 68 to 72. That is the normal one for making lager. That is with the meshing. Boiling, it has to go around about 80 plus up to 100. and that temperature between 80 and 100 needs to be maintained at that temperature for an hour. Nothing more, nothing less. If your temperature is not yet above 80, you cannot start counting your hour. So you need to bring the temperature up to 80 and above, and then start counting your hour. And once the hour has elapsed, you close everything, you release the remaining steam, you cool your wort. And then again, in the industrialized fraternity, they are using the heat exchangers. Once you are done boiling, immediately you are transferring your wort into the heat exchanger where there is cool water or the ice water, and then your wort will be instantly cooled by channeling that wort in the cold cylinders or tubes where the wort will be brought to room temperature. And at that particular temperature, around about 30, you are now ready to pitch, which is the addition of the yeast inside your fermentation vessel. I hope that makes sense. Right. So we spoke about the raw materials. We spoke about how we produce the wort. And now let's discuss a little bit about fermentation. And as I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I believe you already covered that section with Prof. Kana. Right. So the cooled wort, as I explained how the wort is cooled, is aerated and inoculated with the yeast. However, there's two different yeasts that you guys need to keep in mind of. There is what we call top fermenting yeast and also bottom fermenting yeast. The top fermenting yeast ferments at 15 to 22 degrees Celsius. You can note that by the temperatures, higher temperatures is the top yeast, and then lower temperatures is the bottom yeast. And then the difference with this yeast is that the top fermenting yeast are the yeast used for ale production, while the bottom fermenting yeast are used when we are making lager, right? So there's a difference in that. And then fermentation takes place in the batch. Of course, you have to add the wort, add your yeast, and then close it up, allow fermentation to take place over time. So batch reaction in a cylindrical flask or traditional fermenter. Traditional fermenter is simply a bucket. Those that are familiar with the process, making umqombothi is literally traditional fermentation process where you add your grains and then you add the yeast, you cover that up. There will be some bubbling taking place, and even people who are working on it, they'll tell you, do not open or do not touch, wash your hands before you touch anything. That is so that you do not contaminate or you do not introduce any strains that might interfere with the fermentation at that particular stage. So this is very important. And again, this is where you are going to start applying microbiology. So this continues for over 5 to 6 days until all carbohydrates have been depleted. And then this is very important. Again, we will get towards the end of this lecture, I'll show you how to calculate the carbohydrates or the sugar that is in your wort, which will give you an indication either to continue fermenting or to supplement the sugar content, which is the carbohydrates. And once you know what is that you are making, what alcohol percentage you want to end up with, you will then also go back and make calculations to say how much sugar do I need to supplement into my fermenter so that my fermentation can go on. But normally with the grains that we are using for beer making the malt, run about 5 to 6 days, the sugar should be run about 90% depleted. The 10% can be added on when you are bottling. We'll get to that stage now. So after fermentation, the first cycle of fermentation, the beer at this stage is called green beer, which is then has to undergo the maturation step. The maturation step is when you're taking this green beer that results after 6 days of fermentation without opening the vessel. You collect that is a green beer. You cannot drink that. It does have the smell of beer. It looks like beer at most of the time, but then you cannot drink it. All right. And then you can take that, put it into a keg, or you can bottle it. And then with that, you then also can decide. You can either add your flavorants or supplement with the sugar and then allow it to further mature. All right. So as I said, I'm not going to go into much details about fermentation, but if you do have any questions, you can ask your question. And again, the most important part, let me just ask this. What do you get from fermentation? What products do you get? Anyone? Ethanol, correct. What else?
Liquid of yes.
Pardon? You get ethanol in what?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide, correct. So carbon dioxide is very, very important in beer making. Super important, if I can mention that. Reason being, the foam that you see here, it is as a result of carbon dioxide. And the process is called carbonation, which is why you cannot be opening your fermenter at any given time to check anything, because as soon as you open that fermenter, you will be releasing carbon dioxide. Does it make sense? And that's the reason why even when you open the bottle, there will still be some bubbles coming up. That is different compared to the wine. You open the wine, you pour the wine, it remains still. There is no bubbles, unless if it's sparkling wine. That's a big difference. However, with beer, you need the carbon dioxide so that it can have the foamy kind of feel even on your tongue. As you are drinking it, you can feel that there are still bubbles on the liquid that you are drinking. That is because of the carbonation that took place and as a result of your active yeast. However, with modernization, of course, there is industrial carbonation where they are using carbon dioxide directly to carbonate. And also that is how your 0% alcohol is made. They don't necessarily need the yeast to make alcohol. Therefore, they can get the hops, they can get the malt for the taste and the aroma, but then use carbon dioxide to make the foam that you get from your bottles. Hope that is understandable as well. All right. And again, does anybody know what do we call a beer without bubbles? If you open a bottle of beer, it does not have bubbles. What do we call that? Any idea?
I think it's a cider.
It's a cider. No, it's not a cider. Nice one. It's not a cider. A cider is prepared differently. And again, you can use the same process to make your cider. However, the yeast has to differ. Also, you have to add more flavorings for the sugar and the taste of your cider. So not so much different with the preparation process, but then there are ingredients that you need to add when you're making the cider. Nice shot. But what do you call it? The cider does have bubbles. And it is carbonated as well. All right, we call it a flat beer. It's a simple way. It's a flat beer because it does not make any bubbles. There's no reaction in it. So hence it's flat. And when you get such a beer, there's so many possibilities that you can get such a beer if you don't follow the protocol as you should. Firstly, it could be because your yeast was not active. That's why there's no carbonation. Secondly, you could be having leaks on your fermentation vessel, which allows the gas to go out. Thirdly, you could be having contamination that some microorganisms are growing in your vessel and then outcompeting the yeast that you have. And because of that, you no longer have the beer that you've got, but you've got something else. That's why there's no carbonation. And most of the time, all those other microorganisms, chances are they are not making alcohol as a product. And because it's flat beer, it could be flat beer without alcohol percentage in it, or it could be flat beer with the initial alcohol that was made before maturation. Does that make sense? All right, hope it does. I'm going to continue. Right, so maturation, this occurs at lower temperatures, at around about 4 to 15 degrees or 4 to 8 degrees, depending on what you're making, either the lager or the ale, right? Remember the top fermenter, you're making the ale, then you need to incubate your fermentation vessels at lower temperatures. And then the bottom one, the top yeast you'll have to use for the ale, and then this is with the higher temperatures, right? And then the lager needs to go down, which is around about 4 degrees, and then this is done with the bottom yeast. And then commercial beer is normally clarified and filtered or pasteurized to remove the microorganisms before packaging. This is also quite important, but not necessary when you are making your traditional beer. However, when you are pouring your beer that you've made at home or in the self-made brewery, you also need to consider that there will be the settlement that you've got at the bottom, which will be having your dead yeast that will be inside there. And some of the yeast could still be active even after that time because the temperature is conducive for the yeast to continue proliferating. And this is very important to also note, very, very importantly, with the traditional beer. It could be that the traditional beer has the highest alcohol percentage because firstly, it is not measured. Secondly, it continues fermenting because there is no settling that people do. After it is made and it is fermented, they drink it as it is. And what you should also understand with microbiology is that the yeast, when they get into your stomach, they continue fermenting. That's why some people will be drinking umqombothi, and then 2 days later, they still feel drunk. It's still simply because the yeast inside your stomach still continues to ferment what you've got, okay? Which is why you need to eat before drinking umqombothi or even after, just so that that can leave your system within the next 48 hours, right? And then drinking that consecutively can also be hazardous to your health as you are having live and viable yeast now inhabiting your stomach, which is not so healthy, right? So mature beer can be supplemented with sugar and findings to produce conditioned carbonated beer that is dispensed into the bottles or kegs. Remember what I said about carbonation is very important in beer. So the commercial side of things, they've came up with the carbonation process where you can have your flat beer being carbonated. You can then add whatever that you want, and this is how the cider is also made. All right. So now bring us to the last part of the section or the lecture is the quality control measure where you are measuring. Is there a question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I wanted to know, since you said ale is produced in slightly higher temperatures than I forgot the other name of a beer, but
Is the lager.
yes, the lager. So I want to know what about the traditional beer? Is it is it the same as ale, or is it more? Does it require more temperatures than ale? And another question is, since you spoke about um, okay, what was it now?
Okay, let me answer your first question while you're formulating your second one, right?
Okay.
All right. So with your traditional beer or umqombothi, most of the time they do buy yeast that they add. It's just fermenting yeast that you can get from the counter in the shops anywhere. And then it's called normally a baker's yeast. It's the same yeast that you can use for your bread making. And then again, the factor that you need to keep in mind is that you are not working in a sterile environment. And because of that, any yeast that is out there can get into your system and continue fermenting. However, people that are producing umqombothi as a business, they do have their starter culture or their inoculum, which is what they keep on the side to start off the fermentation when they are doing their next batch. And again, it's very important that your vessels, even though you're doing umqombothi, they need to be cleaned should there be contamination. But then when you start the fermentation again, the second cycle, you do add that starter culture. And we cannot now say the yeast that we are using is a top or bottom. With traditional beer, all type of yeast that are present in the environment tends to be inside your vessel. However, the ones that will be proliferating will be the ones that will be utilizing the sugar that is in the components that you're going to be giving your yeast to ferment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yes.
Yeah, remember with the environmental settings where you do not control the environment, anything can grow, which is why it is very important in beer making to boil. In boiling, you are eliminating all the other microorganisms. Simple contamination in beer can turn the beer to taste differently, to smell differently, to even start being cloudy. Imagine having a cloudy beer. That is a very bad side to say, I cannot drink this beer, it's not going to be desirable, which is why it's important to work in a very clean environment when you are making bioproducts that are going to be consumed by people at the later stage. All right. Did you remember your second question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can shoot.
Yes. You also spoke about the flat beer, and I want to know if since you said it might be caused by maybe contamination by other organisms that may compete with yeast. And now I want to know, is there any is there any beer that is a flat beer here in South Africa or other countries that is so yeah, since you said it can be carbonated, so what is maybe an example of a flat beer here in South Africa, or what is maybe the effect at the end? Does it look the same as other, or does it have the same amount of alcohol as other beers?
Okay. I'm gonna go back a bit, yeah? Just be with me. Flat beer is not desirable. We don't need flat beer. We cannot wake up in the morning to make flat beer. However, flat beer happens when there's a mistake or there's something wrong that has gone with your fermentation process. And what I said with carbonation, it is when you are making a beverage that does not require fermentation, which is alcohol making. And with that, you can make your own juice, for an example, and then you carbonate it. Take your sodas, for an example, your Coca-Colas, your Sprite, and whatsoever. You open them, there's that sound. That is a sign or a sign of carbonation. It is a carbonated drink. Does it make sense?
Yes, yes,
true? And
yes.
now, if you open your Coca-Cola and then it does not have the pre-sound and there's no bubbles, that will be a flat Coca-Cola. Imagine drinking that. It won't be a Coca-Cola, it will be more like a cola drink, not a Coca-Cola anymore that you know to be from the shelves, which is why we say we cannot wake up in the morning and then go make flat beer. So you won't find it in the shops unless if it is not beer. Beer should be carbonated and should be having alcohol unless if they say it's 0% beer. But even if it's 0% beer, it should still be having carbon dioxide. It should not be flat. That's why I say flat beer, it is not desirable. You might as well drink water and put sugar in it, right? That's a side joke, right? Anyway, we've got this tool that has been used for years in the brewery and it's called the hydrometer. The hydrometer, you use it with the measuring cylinder. You fill your beer or your wort to 100 milliliters, and then you dump it in using this particular portion that has to go in. And then these readings, which is what you've got here, will give you how much alcohol you can make from that wort, provided the yeast that you're going to be using will be fermenting or will be using all the sugar that is present. I hope that is clear. So this is just an estimation. You are estimating when you start. And then now, because things have been automated, we've got what you call a hydrometer. And then a hydrometer works the same way as we've got the refractometer. This is the hydrometer. And then we've got the refractometer. The hydrometer works with the liquid, which is the wort. And then the refractometer still works with the liquid, but this one does not use the 100 milliliters anymore. You just need a drop, literally a drop. That's all you need. 50 to 100 microliters, that's all you need, which is why it's very important to technologically advance. And this is another advancement in our beer making fraternity, that you can assess how much alcohol you're going to be having before fermentation. And even after fermentation, you can use the same instrument to check how much alcohol have you made and how much more can still be made if fermentation continues. All right. So I'm not going to go into the details about this. I wish you guys were in Westville. Then I was going to demonstrate how this works. But this is how it is. And then you literally need to wash it before using it, sterilize it, and then you add your drop of the wort or the liquid, even the beer itself, you can add it there. You look through this window. This is what you're going to be seeing inside the window. And then there's a white line, which needs to be at the bottom if there is no sample or when there is only water. We'll explain the significance of the white line. And then this white line will keep on going up, giving the compositions of your sample. And based on these numbers, you should be taking them to calculate how much beer, how much alcohol will your beer have after fermentation, right? So you drop a sample there, you close this lid, and then you observe. And then what you're gonna be seeing in the field will be this particular window, right? So this is how it will look. And then the temperature should be at 20 degrees Celsius. This is optimal for this particular equipment so that it gives you accurate readings. And then what you get from this refractometer is the Briggs percentage and the SG word, which is the standard gravity, all right? So the specific gravity, not standard. So the SG word is the standard gravity, specific gravity. You've got the Briggs percentage and you've got the temperature. If you've got higher temperatures, more than 30, for an example, it will not give you accurate readings because most of those are still not settled. So that's why you need to put the temperature down to around about 30 to 20, and then you can take your readings thereafter. Okay. So SG word provides the specific gravity of the liquid, which is what you'll be adding there. And then the Briggs percentage provides the measure of gravity, which can be used to calculate alcohol percentage, right? So the Briggs, or the degree BX, is the number of grams of sucrose present per 100 grams of liquid. So here we're talking about a concentration of solutes, which is the Briggs percentage. So the sample, the liquid temperature needs to be standardized to 20 degrees or room temperature, not more than 30 degrees, as I alluded earlier. So what I was explaining with the Briggs is that it gives you how much solute have you dissolved. For an example, if you take a cup of tea, you add hot water, you add 2 spoons of sugar, and then you obviously swirl up until it's dissolved. You measure this, or you put your sample there, it will not be at 0, run about maybe 5, and then you add more sugar. This line will keep on going up based on how much solutes are dissolved. Hope that makes sense. It does not measure the OD, but it measures the gravity, which is the dissolved solids, right? So high temperatures will affect the readings of the refractometer, so it will give you inaccurate readings, which is why it is very important that you standardize the temperature. This is classically what you can look at, or you can see if your temperatures are around about 35 to 40 degrees. There is no clear demarcation of where the line is. But if you can check with this one, you can see this is just before 15. And again, with the SG word, you can clearly say this is just at 1.055 or 1055 or above that. And that's all you need. All right. And we'll get to how you use this particular figures in your calculations to calculate or to estimate your alcohol percentage that you're going to be making. Right. So refractometer calculations, please pay attention here. I'm not going to be long as well. This checks your SG and then the Briggs percentage before and after fermentation to compare. So when you are brewing, you need to have your wort before you add your yeast. That means before fermentation. And this is the reason, the reason you do that is so that you can estimate how much sugar you've got in your wort and if you need to supplement with more adjuncts. All right. And if you've got enough, we'll get to how much you need to have in your wort for you to say you've got a good wort for your good beer. And then after fermentation, you also need to take another sample with the green beer that I explained previously to check how much have you made. And that can simply be determined by the Briggs at that particular post-fermentation stage, minus or deducted by the initial sugar concentration. And that, which is the difference, you can then multiply by 0.55. It will give you the percentage of alcohol that you've got. And furthermore, the actual reading after first cycle of fermentation can give you the estimation of, if you keep your fermentation going on from that point, how much more alcohol can you make? All right. And again, at that particular stage, you can then decide, is my beer okay that I can terminate the first cycle of fermentation to start maturing, or should I keep it there for long, or what do I need to add? Right. And then after fermentation, apply the same calculation as above, deduct the new estimate from the first one, and then you can estimate how much has been produced. All right. Hope that is clear. And then, so this is what you need to understand about the refractometer readings. If you've got the SG watt, that, right, it's 1.00 at the bottom, right? And then as the concentrations go up of the solids, this numbers also is 1.00 up to 1.120. That's the max for this particular one. However, if this goes down, it also shows that your sugar concentration has gone down, hence the viscosity or the gravity of your liquid has decreased. And that is also a great indication to show you that your yeast has utilized the carbohydrates that you had initially, right? So the higher solids will give you higher SG. And then the higher SG means you've got high sugar concentration. And the high sugar concentration also gives you the higher estimate of alcohol. Does anyone know what is the gravity of water? If you are to put water in the refractometer, where will the blue line be? Any idea? You don't have to be right. Let's just have a conversation a bit. There is no 0 SG. There is 1.000. The Briggs have 0, but the SG does not have 0. At 1, exactly at 1. All right, when you're taking readings with this particular instrument, you need to mention all the figures because a 005 is very significant. Please pay attention to that. A 1.040 is a very big number when using this particular instrument, which is why you cannot just say 1 or you cannot say 1 point something or 1.0. All these three numbers after the comma are critical. So with water, it will give you 1.000 of the SG watt. And what is the reason behind that? Why are we getting the 0 Briggs? %100 correct. So with water, there's no sugar inside it, and there is no dissolved solids, which is why it will give you 0 Briggs and then 1.00 of gravity. Okay, and as soon as you start dissolving the solids or the sugar inside this water, the Briggs will go up a bit, and then the SG watt will also start going up, also demarcating or indicating to you that there is solids being dissolved, right? So you just explained that second question, that sugar, water does not have any sugar. So that's why we're gonna be getting 0 Briggs and then 1.00 of the SG watt. So what was the SG of your wine? Okay, this is a question that we had in our experiment that we were running in Westville, where we were making wine. So the wine that we made, we also managed to get enough sugar, and then we also got the production of alcohol, and that was indicated by the removal or the lowering of the SG watt and then the Briggs percentage, right? In your knowledge, what percentage is alcohol in your beer? How much alcohol does your normal beer have?
5%.
5%, roughly 5%, right? And then with that, you need to know how to calculate that to get to 5%, right? And then what about the wines? What about the wine? You are right. Beer is around about 5%.
I think it depends. Some may have 11 or 16.
Awesome, that's great. So which one is higher based on that?
The one with
The
16.
wine. Great. So with that with those figures, you then need to be able to use this particular equation to say if you've got around about 5, how much Briggs percentage should I be having? Any idea? Quick calculation. 9.09, right? Which is around about 10. Okay, that will be giving you what? 5% of alcohol. So this means this should be round about double of what you're gonna be getting. So now after this lecture, you should be able to know with the wine that you're gonna be seeing in the store, if it has run about 10% of alcohol, how much bricks did it have, or does it have? What's the bricks percentage if it's 10% alcohol without calculating it? There you go. So that's how you'll be able to even see from the brewery. You don't even need to use your calculator anymore, because once you start seeing the bricks values, it will obviously give you, okay, now I've got around about 7 or 8. 8 divided by 2, you've got around about 4% of your alcohol that what can produce. And if you are at 8, you are making lager. What are you going to do? What should you do? Say these are your readings. After making your wort or preparing your wort, you are about to add the yeast, and you are aiming to make a beer or a lager with 5% alcohol. That is a classical exam question. What? 100%. So what you do, you add sugar. And what do you call sugar in this lecture? What's the name of the supplements that we add? What do we call them? Nope, somewhere there, around. Try again. Adjuncts, right? Adjuncts are is the right word that you need. So you need to add the adjuncts in your wort or the production of your of the fermentation vessel, so that you can increase the bricks percentage. And because of that, you are now increasing your chances of the yeast that you're going to be using to give you or to produce around about 10%, sorry, 5% of your alcohol in the beer. Okay. Nice one. Now let's continue. So with the lager, you're looking at around about 8 to 10. This is the bricks percentages. And then the ale is around about 12. And if the ale is around about 12, what is the alcohol percentage? Any idea? About 6%. Now you know how to apply that. So you simply half it, and then you can go sit down and do the actual calculations if you need to be accurate. But from this, you can clearly estimate. These are also estimates. And then based on the effectivity of your yeast, it will be giving you what you actually aim to get. And in the sparkling wines, these are the bricks percentages. And you guys did say that with 18, you are looking at around about 9% of your alcohol percentage. And again, with wines, there's so much additives, including the grapes. The grapes also do have their own sugar contents. Remember what you said about this particular beverages. They are plant-based. The fruits in the wine are a source of carbohydrates that the yeast is going to be utilizing to generate your wine. And then again, in your beer making, you've got the malt. The malt are a source of carbohydrates to do the same. And then with wines, you've got different ones. You've got the sparkling wine, you've got the white wines, and you've got the red wines. And then the red wines, so far they are known to contain high alcohol percentages, simply because you are using the entire red grapes, which are also very sweet. And because of that sweetness, it is an indication of high concentrations of sugar. And if you've got high concentrations of sugar based on this particular indication, where am I now? High concentrations of sugar will then mean high estimate of alcohol. All right. And that's it from my side. Any questions? Is there any question? Okay, I'm not gonna go back to all the slides, but is it possible that you guys just indicate for me in the next 5 minutes if everything is clear? Pardon? Awesome. So there's no questions.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I want to try to get the summary of what we have been doing today, or right now. So you said, in fact, I'm trying to confirm if